Hi, everyone. Welcome to the AP World History Modern live cram preview. This is the topic tonight. Last week we did this, same time, same place with China. And tonight we're going to be covering the Middle East. This is the team that we have here at Fiveable. I am Dr. Amy Poza. Some of my students call me Dr. AP because my name is Amy Poza, so my initials are AP, and I teach AP World History. That's a really cheesy joke. And I'll let the rest of my team introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. I'm BJ Dranby. I talked a lot last week when we did China CCOT. Today, I'll be over on the chat helping working with you all. Look forward to it.
Hey, I'm Dev. I am a former world history student, and I'm so excited to be over on the chat today and sharing a quiz I made. I love learning about the Middle East and can't wait to share it all with you.
Adeline? We'll let Cynthia introduce herself.
Hi guys, my name is Cynthia. I'm a senior this year. I'm super excited to help y'all. I will be managing the chat.
Excellent. All right. Can't wait to see you all in the chat.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. What I'd love for all of you guys to do is to put your information in the chat. Where are you coming from? Is this your first AP class? Are you taking any other AP classes? And give us some information about you. So, see. While I do that, I'm going to, you guys could introduce yourselves. Where are you from? Some of my students. That's awesome. I love that you guys are here. Extra credit. No, I'm just kidding. Can't do that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Maybe. All right. Never mind. Wait, hold on. Okay, so one thing that we're going to do as we're talking about the Ottomans is I would like you guys to, first of all, I posted a poll. The poll was, what is your favorite Islamic gunpowder empire? And the reason why I posted that is that I would like you guys to have, 1 second. This is like the hardest part of teaching, is managing the technology. All right. That's not working. Okay, well. Stop sharing. Okay. BJ, can you come back on and share the slides that are posted?
I think you can just share the tab.
Yeah, it's not letting me do that.
Make sure the tab is at the top of the bar, but yeah.
Yeah. Let me see. Oh, wait, does that work?
Yes.
Okay, we have slides.
All good. It's our first night. Nice dress rehearsal for a reason.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so now. Okay. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat. There should be a button that gives you an access to the study guide. So I posted a cram review, like guiding questions that'll give you some, but the first thing that it does is it gives you some, like you can click on it here. It says Ottoman Empire Cram Review Guide, make a copy. It'll give you some of the like learning objectives related to the AP World History curriculum. It'll give you some key terms, and then also it'll give you some other kinds of guiding questions as we go through the slides. Going through them. All right, so this is a cram preview of the Ottoman Empire. Be sure to follow at Think Fiveable on social. on social media. The cram schedule coming up, starting on Saturday night, we have on May 6th, we'll be going over units 1 through 4. On May 7th, units 5 through 8. May 8th, unit 9 and the DBQ. We'll be doing some more skills practice on May 9th. And then May 10th will be everything you need to know to get a 5 on the exam. So tonight, we already did some introductions. We're going to start with continuity and change over time, looking at the Ottoman Empire from period 2 to period 3. Take a little break for a quiz, and then move into continuity and change over time from period 3 to period 4. And then have another quiz break, and we'll have some time for Q&A. One thing that we wanted to point out is to make the most of these cram finales is there's a couple of suggestions. One, keep active. So as you are taking notes, you want to be taking some sort of notes, but don't try to write everything down. You don't have to keep up with it. This is something that will be available as a replay immediately after the event. You can also ask questions, maybe make little notes to yourself about key terms to look up later, and maybe make a to-do list. One of the things that we're doing is reviewing so that you can identify gaps in your knowledge. The other thing is that on Cram Hub, you will have all the slides that are used for all of the crams, the review packets and replays for you. Use the group chat, ask each other questions, share tips and tricks, participate. And then finally, there will be some sections where there's a Q&A tab that we're going to check in with you. You can use the Q&A tab before then, but we will take a break and pause and look at the Q&A. That is also a place where you can upvote questions that you want to see addressed first. All right, in terms of our community, we want to be supportive and lift each other up, like when there's technical difficulties. Be patient. We do have, not just tonight, but there will be 15 total hours if you guys are going to do all of the crams. And be nice to each other. We're all real people in the same boat, trying to take on the College Board, conquer the AP World History Modern exam, and get 5s. So we're here to work together and tackle this curriculum. All right, you can post about your cram finale experience and possibly get some money, $100. And so by sharing your cram experience on TikTok or Instagram, you will use hashtag Fiveable crams and tag @thinkfiveable in the poster caption. Make sure the account is public. And you can win by making the people who are looking at these things laugh, getting a ton of views. Several students are going to win each week, and the winners are going to be selected through these next 2 weeks of all the AP exams. So be sure to take advantage of that. Check that out. All right, so let's get started. Has everybody been able to hopefully access the review guide? Possibly the study review. All right, great. I'm glad you guys are sharing tips and tricks. So the first thing that I want to talk about is in period 1, there is no Middle East. There is only the Islamic world, Dar al-Islam. So I want to talk about the relationship between the Middle East and the Islamic world before we move into talking about the Ottomans, because the Ottomans dominate the Middle East in period 2, period 3, and the beginning of period 4. So the Ottomans are really important for understanding the Middle East as a region for most of the AP World History Modern curriculum. Before the Ottomans in period 1, there is the Middle East. Now, one thing that is important to remember in the Middle East in period 1 that is still true today, which is the majority of people in the Middle East are Muslim, but not all Muslims are Middle Eastern. So in period 1, the reason why they emphasize not just a region, but instead the entire Islamic world is that it's a time of incredible cultural diffusion. So that is a time period in period 1 where Islam is spreading along trade routes, right? You guys know some of the major trade routes of period 1, where you have these increasing networks of exchange, new technologies that are leading to all of these interactions throughout Eurasia and throughout Afro-Eurasia. And as a result, Islam spreads very widely. So by the time you get to 1200 in the Middle East, religion has, various belief systems have influenced the Middle East, Middle Eastern life, Middle Eastern society. But Islam is a predominant religion, and but it has spread from the trans-Saharan trade routes into West Africa, from North Africa, the Indian Ocean trade with the Muslim merchant diaspora. So the Islamic world is very extensive, but it does have a special relationship with the Middle East for 2 main reasons. One is language. The way that Islam is structured, or the way that Islam functioned initially, is that revelation comes orally through the Prophet Muhammad. So this is a sacred language. It is a language that, whether or not someone is in Africa or in Indonesia, the prayers are in Arabic. It is the language of God, according to the religion. So language is really important in terms of creating some sort of cultural unity. And for most of world history, education is something that happens in religious institutions in a lot of places, which means that Islamic education, whether one was in North Africa or in Southeast Asia, Islamic education would probably be based in Arabic. That enables travelers like Ibn Battuta to travel pretty widely in period 1. He has an Islamic education, he speaks Arabic, he's from North Africa, and he can just travel all around the world for 30 years, finding people and a job wherever he goes, and somehow staying out of trouble most of the time. So that is an example of why the Middle East has a sort of special relationship to the Islamic world, because it is the origin of Islam. The second thing is, of course, thinking about the 5 pillars, thinking about the whole idea of the sacred places of Mecca and Medina. Mecca is the birthplace of Muhammad, and the sacred place of the Kaaba. People orient themselves during prayer, during ritualized prayer, toward Mecca. So there is also a sort of special place in the religion more broadly. Wherever one is in the world, there's an orientation. And even thinking about the Hajj, the pilgrimage. So even though the majority of Muslims are not Middle Eastern, because it was a religion that arose in the Arabian Peninsula in the 7th century, it does have a special cultural significance. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Why in period 1 is it just the Islamic world? Because the point is that Islam is, spreads far and wide outside of the Middle East, but there are these sort of cultural unifying elements. Okay, so why are we talking about the Ottomans? Great question. That's what I say all the time. Why are we saying this? So who are the Ottomans? The Ottomans are important because in the Middle East, there's a lot of, in period 1, there's a lot of fragmentation, right? You have the Abbasids, they break up into a bunch of different states. Well, actually, the Abbasids kind of just decline in significance, and you have the arrival of the Turks who set up their independent sultanates. At the beginning of period 2, you're going to have the Ottomans on the scene. The Ottomans actually originate a little bit earlier. There's a man, Osman, maybe some mythical origins no one really knows because there's not a lot of sources about him, but that he was a Turkic tribal leader on the Anatolian Peninsula who united various Turkic tribes and increasingly, started, his followers became known as Osmanis, which is where you get Ottomans. So you have this, Turkic state that's growing and growing at the end of period 1 with these tribal confederations that are fighting and pushing back against, for example, the Byzantines. But in 1453, that's where the AP curriculum, that's where the College Board, why they put the Ottomans into the curriculum, is that is when they conquer Constantinople. And they conquer Constantinople from the Byzantines and rename it Istanbul and set that up as their capital. So even though the Ottoman Empire was around, you can see just because of their longevity, they dominate the Middle East for the entirety of the AP World History Modern curriculum for the most part. They originate in 1299, but really you can think about them 1453 as Ottomans on the scene. And they're expanding period 2 from 1450 to 1750, period 2. This is the glory days. They're doing great. They're expanding, they're winning battles, they're taking more territory, they're building amazing imperial mosques. And then in period 3, they start to decline, but they don't fall until after World War I. So one of the most interesting time periods for the Ottomans is that period 3, they're challenged, they're declining, they're trying to reform, but then they roll it back, but then try to reform more. And just when it looks like the Ottomans might actually be able to reorganize their state, to modernize, to westernize, World War I happens and they fall. So the reason to study the Ottomans is that they exemplify everything what's going on in world history, right? This is not regional history. This is world history. All of the trends that happen throughout world history, we're looking at it through one particular lens tonight with the Middle East and the Ottoman Empire, but these are things that are happening all over the world. So tonight, as we go through this, I would love to challenge you to think about comparisons, to think about, as I talk about the Ottoman Empire, Type it into the chat. See what your peers think. See what Mr. Dramby or some of the other student hosts think about your comparisons. There are 4 major land-based empires that are mentioned explicitly in the curriculum. And you could have like a whole DBQ about them. The Ottomans, Safavids, Mughals, and Qing. These are huge gunpowder empires. Now they're called gunpowder empires because they use gunpowder technology, originally developed in period 1 in China, but was spread all throughout Eurasia, this kind of technology, by the Mongols. Gunpowder is really good for like creating mega cannons that can siege cities. The reason why these empires are so huge, why you have like this large belt of culturally diverse empires that are, you know, bigger than any of the smaller regional states that had come before. The reason why you have that is because they're able to use these militaries that have gunpowder military technology. So the point is that these big 4, compare them and think about how do they manage their empire? How do they incorporate territory? How do they manage the diverse populations? Those empires are ruling minorities, ruling ethnic minorities. So they have these large, diverse empires of different groups of people. What are their strategies of rule? What are their attitudes toward religion, especially towards like religious minorities? Those are the questions that you should be thinking about. It's not just how one state does this, but how does it do it relative to another state? What are similarities and differences? So the Ottomans are an Islamic gunpowder empire. As I mentioned, there are 4 like quote unquote gunpowder empires, these large land-based empires. This is unit 3 of the AP curriculum. 3 of them are Islamic. Those are the Ottomans, Safavids, and Mughals. I like to say that the gunpowder empires, the Islamic gunpowder empires are awesome. Ottoman, Safavids, Mughals. Yeah. OSM. They are awesome. And then, you know, but we can never forget about the Qing over in China, who are also doing similar things, which is not Islamic. So they end up conquering a lot of territory, the Middle East, North Africa, and Southeastern Europe. We'll talk a little bit about that. But their capital, it's significant that their capital is in Southeastern Europe. It is Constantinople. When they conquer Constantinople, they take over one of the biggest, most important buildings when they, you know, rename it Istanbul. But in Constantinople, there was the Hagia Sophia. And the Hagia Sophia was like this grand cathedral. It was a place where the Byzantine emperor would be crowned, and it was also a place of religious authority. So this place of political and religious authority is turned into a mosque, not destroyed, but it's like the Ottomans mapped themselves onto this using this imagery. And then they copied the architecture with like the huge domes. They put up some minarets, and then they built these large imperial mosques to exemplify that they are an early modern empire, an empire that is bigger and grander and advanced. Like one of the biggest founders of the Ottoman Empire, or one of the biggest emperors, Suleiman the Magnificent. So he gets, you know, there's a reason why it's called Magnificent. He had an exchange, an alliance with Queen Elizabeth. You have, you know, this way in which they consider themselves to be on the same playing field. You guys know a lot about usually like the European maritime empires. So, you know, of course, like the British Empire and the Spanish Empire, and Suleiman and the Ottomans are right in there. They are interacting, they're exchanging, they view each other as the same. So, well, not exactly the same. I mean, there's definitely, they're fighting because they are also competing for territory. But so it's really interesting how in which the Ottomans are an early modern empire that does make this larger claim to be, you know, kind of a universal ruler on the same level as some of the like European monarchs that claim divine right. Their religion is Sunni Islam with protections for religious minorities. That protections for religious minorities is really important. When, as many of you know, Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. And then I like to add on to that Isabella and Ferdinand also expelled all the Jews from Spain, like the same year. So when you think Columbus sailed and Spain kicked out the Jewish population of the Iberian Peninsula, that's really significant, actually. Both the time period of exploration and of like the Spanish strategy toward religious diversity was to try to get rid of it. So at that time in the Ottoman Empire, they welcomed the Jews from Spain as a conscious policy, right? Because they are competing with the Europeans. So in contrast, they decided to welcome the Jewish population, and then they're going to set up some particular institutions to incorporate that diversity. But they also fought a lot, not just with Christian Europe, but also with the Shia Safavids. And the Safavids are a really interesting gunpowder empire as well. They don't get a lot of attention, I feel like. They're often overlooked. But the Safavids are a Persian state to the east that border the Ottomans. And they have this like Sunni Shia, that sectarian divide between them. That gets played out on the Ottomans and the Safavids. It reinforces that religious sectarian divide between the Sunni and the Shia. So there's like three main institutions that I think you guys should know about the Ottomans, and then we'll look at how these change over time. So in terms of politics, the Ottomans have a really interesting strategy. But one thing that I want to emphasize that's important to think about with empires, they do different things, but they all want the same thing, which is to strengthen their power and influence. So if an empire changes something that they're doing, or if an empire is doing something different than another empire, it is because they think like the rules have changed. They've been exposed to a new idea, or they're dealing with different conditions, or maybe the global scene has changed and they're having to like catch up to a new model. But the point is, all these empires have different strategies, but they want the same thing: to be powerful and strong, and to preserve their state. So that's really important to think about, is why do they do what they do? They are trying to develop strategies to manage an empire. And the Ottomans come up with this system of devshirme, which is kind of based on an earlier Turkic model, but they have this issue of they're like expanding more broadly and incorporating all sorts of newly conquered people. So one issue is, how do you rule over those conquered people? And the second issue is, how do you like staff an expanding bureaucracy? Because as you expand, then like the actual government is going to have a harder time keeping up with managing all of that territory. So they come up with the strategy of like, well, as you expand, take the conquered people and then put them into the bureaucracy. This seems like a good idea. Now, the conquered people have no choice. It is something where newly conquered people, particularly like Christians in the Balkans, are forcibly like converted to Islam and then conscripted into state service. In contrast, like we talked about last week, how do the Chinese people, how does the Qing Empire and every other dynasty before them, minus like the Mongols, how do they staff their bureaucracy? It's through an exam system, right? You take an exam, you get a job as a government bureaucrat. So the devshirme system is a way of both managing it's like staffing the bureaucracy and also incorporating conquered people into the empire. It's someone who goes up into like the government can have a job even up as high as like the vizier. They can actually have considerable power within the Ottoman bureaucracy. There's another track as well, which is a military track. So conquered people could become not just into this, the civil, not just into the bureaucracy, but also into the military, and that's the janissaries. The janissaries are an elite military corps. I think one interesting comparison that you might want to think about for later is the banner armies on the Manchu Empire, the ways in which they use like elite sort of groups in order to serve their expansion purposes, and then also kind of like pull conquered people into them. That's a time for another one. So a topic for another time. In terms of social, this particular question is about diversity, particularly religious diversity, religious minority communities. And the reason why it's important is because you do have significant non-Muslim populations. So instead of, like in contrast to the Safavids, who are very religiously intolerant, or in the example of like Spain, very religiously intolerant, the Ottomans decide to allow for some degree of autonomy. Now, these people have to be like loyal to the Sultan, right? They are not allowed to be independent. It's just that they are given some degree of autonomy in what are known as millets. Millets are just basically autonomous communities. So for example, the people within the millet, like Armenian Christians, they wouldn't be subject to Islamic law. They could have like their own law codes. They could have their own like local ruler, their own sort of internal judicial system, as long as they were paid a tax and were loyal to the Sultan. So millets are a way of incorporating diversity, not through like letting people do whatever they want, but through actually putting it into the structure of the institution. These are like Sultan approved millets. There are 3 official millets, the Greek Orthodox, the Armenian Christians, and the Jewish population. So that's a way of sort of, in some ways, like controlling diversity through making it official, taking this religion, these religious minorities, and putting them into the state. And then finally, there's, you have to manage the money, right? How are you going to get money from people? For the Ottomans, they farmed out their tax system. So instead of like a centralized bureaucracy with tax collectors that were employed by the government, they would just basically use private contractors. That's what tax farming is. It's not really that complicated. And then land grants, sometimes you might see this. It's just basically like if they went in and conquered a new population, then they would give land to those people. So here's something you can go back and look at later, but think about degrees of religious tolerance as like a basis of comparison. And you can even throw in the Mughals, which I think is really interesting. So for thinking about how things change into period 3, I think we'll pause actually. And I'm going to look at the Q&A. Let's look at some questions. And then we're going to, I'm going to look at like, okay, now you have a base, you know, like who the Ottomans are and what unique Ottoman institutions do in period 2, from 1450 to 1750. And we're going to look at like how that changes. But first, do you have any questions? Yeah, I can go back to the slide. Do you have any, like, look in the Q&A, because it's kind of an interesting question, these comparisons. But if you have any particular questions about, this is Unit 3, Period 2, land-based empires, the Ottomans, the awesome Ottomans. I need to come up with a, why did the Ottoman begin to decline? That is Period 3. We're going to answer that in just a second. The Ottomans don't decline in period 2, but here's my argument, okay? The Ottomans are going to face a lot of challenges in period 3, and then eventually they fall in period 4. But yeah, we'll talk about it in just a second. I just want to pause and answer any questions about the Ottomans in period 2, because that's a great question, why the Ottomans began to decline. There's a variety of external and internal factors. You can always guess what the external factor is going to be in period 3. What is the external factor in period 3? When you think period 3, should always be imperialism. Okay, there's a question about the units, not the periods. Period 2 is Unit 3 and 4. So Unit 3 is land-based empires. Unit 4 are maritime empires. That's period 2, 1450 to 1750. Those are happening at the same time. So you want to think about like buckets, right? You can study by units, but they'll ask the question by time period. 1450 to 1750 is Unit 3 and Unit 4. So when you think about, when you're learning information, I would suggest actually learning it by time period rather than by units. Like, yeah, go through the units, but Unit 3 and Unit 4 is 1450 to 1750, and your questions on your multiple choice, on your SAQ, and your LAQ, and your GBQ are that. Wait, why would imperialism affect the Ottomans? Great question. All right, so let's see. We have some other questions. Why did the Ottomans have autonomy? So it's a strategic choice in order to manage a diverse population. Empires have like a range of choices. They can control, right? Like, for example, in the Jewish community, the rabbi, who would be like the top leader in the millet, would be appointed by the Sultan. It's like having some degree of political control without forcing everyone to speak Turkish and abide by Sharia law. So now the Spanish have a totally different strategy. They're going to actually like make people Catholic with their Inquisition. Stan Akbar, that's funny. All right, so I'm going to move into the next period, which is 1450 to 1900, and there will be people continuing to answer in the chat, and then we have a quiz. All right, so the first thing we want to talk about in terms of like continuity and change is for continuities, always think about Islam, like states rise and fall, but culture is slower to change. It's not that culture doesn't change over time, but it is something that continues to have significance. So like the 5 pillars, for example, in period 1 or period 4 in Africa or in Southeast Asia, you have these sort of like rituals that organize not just individual life, but also community. People break fast together during the month of Ramadan. It is something that continues to organize people's lives and be an important part of their communities. Arabic remains a sacred language, and the symbolic significance of the idea of a caliph is one that's really important. So a caliph pops up. A caliph is a successor to Muhammad. It's like the title is that this has like a new kind of legitimacy, a religious legitimacy. A sultan is a political ruler of an empire, but a caliph is a religious leader of all Muslims, has a kind of like a higher level of legitimacy tied to a religious mandate. It is something that the Ottomans are going to claim and after 1517. And as they continue to decline, they are going to continue to like, they're going to even more assert this claim of caliph. So we'll talk about that. All right, you have 2 major changes, and this is kind of how it relates to the rise of the West. If we talk about like, why did the Ottomans decline? The first thing is before, in the early modern period, from 1450 to 1750, unit 3 and 4, everyone is pretty much on par in terms of like standard of living. So the Western European empires, the Qing, the Mughals, the Ottomans. After 1750, with the first industrial revolution, that's what's called like the Great Divergence, which is the split, the global economic inequality, and you have the rise of the West. It's not necessarily that the Ottomans start doing things differently. It's that the game has changed. And now, instead of just like being a trade route for luxury goods and various kinds of porcelain, you have machines that mass produce goods. Those new technologies, those industrial technologies, are largely concentrated in the West. And so the global share of manufacturing shifts away from the South to the North in terms of the rise of the industrialized West. That is going to create a lot of economic strain on the Ottoman Empire. Literally, they start shrinking, and then territorially, they start shrinking. There was a question about who does the Ottomans conquer? There's some like key dates, but there were the Ottomans conquer in period 2, the Mamluks in Egypt. They take over the Holy Lands. They conquer territory and push into the Safavids in the east. They go into pretty far into southeastern Europe and conquer territory. So there is like, I think under like Suleiman the Magnificent, 15 different battles that he wins that expand Ottoman territory. His father, Selim I before him, did as well. In terms of period 3, however, it's like the opposite. Now there's territorial contraction. So let's talk about what happens. The first thing is nationalism. This is unit 5. So from 1750 to 1900, one of the key elements of unit 5 is the rising force of nationalism, which is really going to work against these large multicultural empires. I mean, one could argue that no matter what the Ottomans did, nationalism was going to tear at their fabric because they are a ruling minority over a large culturally diverse empire. Like, what are the other empires that are like them? The Qing Empire that falls, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire that falls, and nationalism, particularly like in the Balkans, which is where the Ottomans are as well, is one of the reasons why you have, World War I. So the rising tide of nationalism. So the Balkans are this like mountainous region right above Greece. Everybody knows Italy's shaped like a boot. Like right across from there is this mountainous region. And so the Balkans, there's like Greek nationalism and Serbian nationalism in the early 19th century. French imperialism in North Africa. So remember, the Ottomans they're losing territory not just in Europe, but in North Africa, and that's mainly because of French imperialism. There's also an internal revolt in Egypt. This is Muhammad Ali, who decides to like break off in a civil war with the Ottomans and start his own like state-sponsored industrialization. Muhammad Ali is also in the curriculum. And then they have a series of embarrassing wars. So the Crimean War, for example, the Russo-Turkish Wars. An interesting thing about this is like, why did the Ottomans even get into World War I? They weren't even part of the original Triple Alliance, right? One of the reasons why is because they are trying to recover territory. They use the excuse of World War I. Well, they're enemies with Russia because they have a series of Russo-Turkish wars. And then they use the excuse of World War I to try to expand into Persia and invade Persia. And so they're just like losing. Whereas period 2, 1450 to 1750, they're winning. In period 3, they enter into a period of contraction where they keep losing territory. The Balkans, North Africa, Persia, they're just shrinking. So as a result, like they try to reform. You have some, in contrast to like the state-sponsored, you have state-sponsored industrialization. Muhammad Ali's Egypt, that's in Unit 5. But the Ottoman reforms, they tried-ish. There's a series of ways in which they resist reform, but the reforms are called Tanzimat. This is an important name to know. The resistance, it comes from, well, the ulama are a good example of a group that resists. I always think about like the Confucian scholars, for example, in the Qing Empire. Sultan Abdul Hamid, it should be actually Sultan Abdul Hamid II, I think, who is the one who's a sultan who kind of rolls back some of the reforms as well. So the Tanzimat does a couple of things. It formally abolishes the millet system, though millets still like stay around informally. But the goal of the Tanzimat is to centralize power in order to strengthen the Ottomans in response to the rise of the West. So they're losing territory, they're losing money. What are they going to do? The idea is that they modernize. They centralize power economically, banking, taxation, military, get rid of the janissaries. And in response to nationalism, they come up with this idea of Ottomanism. This is the promotion of the concept of like Ottoman citizenship in order to counter this idea that yes, one may be Arab or Armenian or Greek or Serbian, but isn't it also great that they are Ottoman? So Ottomanism is a response to the rising significance of nationalism in the 19th century. All right, so there's this comparison, if you want to do some thesis practice, using the examples of the Ottoman and the Qing, analyze the extent to which responses to industrialization outside of Europe were similar. This is part of Unit 5. Unit 5 positions the Ottoman Empire and the Qing Empire as very similar in their type of response to industrialization. So I will go ahead and pause. The Ottomans end in 1923 after World War I. Well, Turkey begins, I guess, like the final treaty. But you can think of World War I kills the Ottomans. Okay, the Ottomans, they have their origins in period 1. They're on the scene with the conquest of Constantinople in 1453 in period 2, and that is Unit 3. They're doing great. They're expanding. They're building mosques. They're participating in like the global economy. And then from 1750 to 1900, they encounter a series of crises because the West has industrialized. So now they are trying to catch up. They're trying to play catch up like everyone else is trying to play catch up, right? Russia, Japan, the United States, Qing China, everyone's trying to figure out how to catch up to a newly industrialized West that's going forth and like encroaching on territory. So, and economically, as an economic powerhouse. At the same time, they're really being weakened by the rising tide of nationalism that is internally pulling apart pieces, chunks of their empire. So they're losing chunks to imperialism, they're losing chunks to nationalism, and then economically, they just can't keep up. And then World War I is going to happen in period 4, but not until the 20th century. That is Unit 7, 7.1. The fall of the Qing, Ottomans, and Russian Empire. So, there's some interesting things that happen before the fall of the Ottomans, though. World War I kills the Ottomans, but there's really a long series. There's a series of things that happen in the decades preceding it. All right, well, we do have a quiz break, so let's move into that. I will stop sharing my screen. Quiz break. And I'll open it up to Deb, who's going to run the quiz.
Okay. Okay. Did that work?
You did it. Good job.
Yay. Okay, everyone come and join on this link. And
A lot of people like to get out their phones if they have them, and that allow you to still be able to watch this screen, but also have it on your phone.
yes, that's a good idea. Okay. I can also put the link in the chat, by the way, if anyone can't see. There you go. Okay.
We have about 30, 45, 47 people joining. I'm going to win, but whatever.
All right. We're on 67 out of 146, so give it a few seconds to have people start joining. Here, okay, you can join by clicking the link that I put up in the chat or by typing the link that's in the middle of the screen. If you're on a laptop right now, I see, is that Aaliyah? You can just like make another tab. There you go. Okay. Yep. Okay. We're at 94 right now. When it gets to 100, we'll start, but you can join continuously as we're going. Okay. Good idea, splitting the screen. Perfect. Okay. All right, we're like about 100, so I'm gonna get started. The first question is, at its peak, the Ottoman Empire controlled territory in all of the following areas except. Okay. You guys able to answer it? Okay, we got 5 answers. Keep them coming, Okay. Nice. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. South Asia. Oh, good job, guys. We're close to half of us knowing it. So this one's a good question to know geography-wise. South Asia was covered by the Mughals. So that's why the Ottomans didn't really have land there. That's like India, like over in that region. Okay, next question. Which weapon was of greatest importance in the Ottoman capture of Constantinople from the Byzantine Empire? Okay, we're seeing some responses. Good job, you guys. Nice. Okay, we're going to reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. The cannon. Wow, we are so close to 100%. Great job on this one, you guys. Very proud of you all. The cannon is the correct answer for this one because since the Ottoman Empire was a gunpowder empire, part of those Islamic gunpowder empires, and cannons utilized gunpowder, my bad. That's was a really good innovation for them. Okay, next question. what was the Ottoman Empire's devshirme system? I saw a lot of people talking about this one in the chat, and Amy went over this one a lot. So let's see if you guys know it. Okay, I'm going to reveal the answer in 3, in 2, and in 1. Good job! Wow, you guys did amazing on this one. So this one was children of the Christian prisoners specifically, and usually from the Balkans, were recruited and given an education in order to serve as bureaucrats and soldiers. Great job, you guys. Okay, number 4. What Eastern Orthodox Church was converted to a Muslim mosque by the Ottomans? I'm going to reveal it in 3, in 2, and in 1. Good job. You guys did amazing on this one again. Over 50% of you. Actually 80%. Wow. And that's the Hagia Sophia Mosque. Okay. Next up, what political rivalry fueled the split within I'm going to show it in 3, 2, 1. Good job, you guys. Wow, 97%. That's amazing. And it was the Ottoman Empire and the Safavid Empire. You might recall that the Ottoman Empire were all Sunni Muslims, and the Safavid Empire were the stricter Shia Muslims. Okay, next up. Which of the following regions was instrumental in providing the Ottomans a military advantage when building their empire? Okay, good. We got some answers. I'm going to reveal it in 3, in 2, and in 1. Okay, this one we should go over a little bit. This one, the answer is China. Yeah, I think that the military and like the geographics of it all are less stressed, so hopefully it's okay, but we'll go over this as a group. Okay. Number 7, which of the following gunpowder empires failed to modernize and was dubbed the sixth man of Europe? Good job, you guys. We're back to our usual, very impressive. This one was the Ottoman Empire. As you know, during World War I, they kind of fell short, and yeah, they kind of fell behind until their eventual decline. Which of the following is not a gunpowder empire? Okay, I'm going to reveal it in 3, 2, 1. Good job, you guys. That was amazing. It is the Manchu Empire. You might remember the acronym AWESOM, S-O-M, for Safavid, Ottoman, Mughal. Okay, both the Ottoman and the Mughal empires. Okay. I'm going to reveal it in 3, in 2, and in 1. Good job, you guys. Expanded with gunpowder weapons. Yep, they're the gunpowder empires, so it makes sense that that's how they would expand. Nice job. And our final question, which one of these were considered the gunpowder empires in the Islamic world? You guys know this. It's kind of a review of other questions. Good thing to have it down. Let's see, I see some answers coming in. Okay. I'm going to reveal it in 3, 2, 1. Nice job! Yep, we got awesome. SOM, Safavid Ottoman Mughal. Great job, everyone. You did amazing. I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Posa. Dr. Posa?
Yes, I'm going to share my screen again.
Awesome.
And we're just going to finish up, and then we'll allow for some Q&A. Let's see. So there's been a lot of questions about the fall of the Ottoman Empire, which are, I think, really, really interesting. And one thing I want to mention is a lot of times the College Board will ask the questions related to internal, external factors. So they will say, evaluate the extent to which internal factors were led to the decline of the Ottoman Empire and external factors. I think all of you guys identified that World War I was the game changer. They were on the losing side of World War I. After the war, they were broken up, and you had the creation of the nation state of Turkey, and the rest of the Ottoman Empire was divided into mandates, which is just a nicer way to say colony, and given to the British and the French. So that was part of a secret deal made during World War I called Sykes-Picot, which I know some of you are familiar with. But internally, they had already been facing a lot of problems for decades before: economic stagnation, rising tide of nationalism, which was pulling apart at the fabric. And the reforms were too little too late. They tried the Tanzimat failed. They had forces of conservatism, like a conservative monarch, who rolled back some of those reforms. And even at the end, in 1908, they had a revolution, a young Turk revolution, some young reformers finally coming back and forcing the Sultan to have a constitution, pushing for industrialization. Is too little too late. And at the end of it, 1914, World War I breaks out. The Ottomans are on the wrong side of that war for reasons that relate back to the 19th century, fighting against the Russians, fighting against the Persians. And then that's it. You know, they lose and they're broken up. And after that, you have new states that are formed. The state of Turkey, which is sort of a different story in period 4, the rise of new states, the rise of nationalism, and the breakup of the Ottoman Empire. So these slides are going to be available. You can, they go along with the handout. They're very easy to kind of use the information from the slide, write it down. But this is actually one of the questions on AP Classroom. I don't know if your teacher has assigned it yet, but it's a DBQ just related to the fall of the Ottoman Empire, with a particular emphasis on the extent to which nationalism was a part of it. So this is Unit 7.1. It's part of Period 4, which is 1900 to the present. So tonight we've covered a lot, right? Just Unit 3, the land-based empires and the rise of the Ottomans on the scene, the decline of the Ottomans and their attempts to reform with the Tanzimat in the 19th century, which is part of Unit 5, the responses to industrialization. And then eventually, of course, they end in Unit 7.1, Period 4, with World War I, broken up. And there's some interesting continuities that kind of reemerge in the 20th century, which I put on the slides, which we don't have time to talk about. But for the last 5 minutes, I'm going to turn it over to BJ and see if he would like to add anything or answer any questions.
I'm here. I'm just clicking my camera on. It's taking a second.
We had another quiz for you guys, but we ran out of time. So much to content. Much content to cover.
So my video is not letting me play my face. Yay, I'm here. So I've been monitoring the chat tonight, and I will say a few things, Dr. Posa. The students understand some of the most major elements, such as the devshirme system and the millet system, or they were realizing that they didn't know those. So I think like some of the kids were like, "Oh, I know this. I could actually spout wisdom," while other kids are like, "What is it?" So everybody knows that when you get offline, those are the words you're going to write down. They're the things you're going to highlight in the questions that Dr. Posa pushed out. Also, I will say, I think it's exceptional that a lot of you are realizing where there are certain power structures in the Ottomans, you will see similar structures in the Mughals and the Qing. So a lot of you were talking about the Mughals for like 12 minutes. I don't even know why, but you were. That's not bad. What I always say is go in your back pocket with one gunpowder empire that you know well. Personally, I like the Mughals the most, but I teach my students the Ottomans the most. They are there the whole story from, most of the units. So you always have them present there in the Middle East. That's why Dr. Posa is selected tonight. So make sure when this session's over and this is a recording and they push out the slides that you guys can access those.
All right. Yeah. As soon as this recording is over, the slides are going to be available. And yeah, that would be great. I think we can post the quiz. Is that possible?
We
I
could
think
try.
so. Yeah.
So
This is Unit 3. You have just, Unit 3, there are 4 empires explicitly mentioned in the curriculum that you could have a DBQ only on. The Ottomans, Safavids, Mughals, and Qing. They're like, there's other things, other land-based empires, but those are your big 4. So make sure that you can do like a spiced tea or just really understand how these land-based empires, the Ottoman, Safavids, Mughal, and Qing, are expanding their gunpowder empires, incorporating new populations, and their attitude toward the religious diversity, because those are some of the central objectives. That's Unit 3, happening between 1450 and 1750. Now, the Ottomans and the Qing, they last through period 3, like all the way up until the beginning of the 20th century.
So we're going to see if a couple more people want to participate in this quiz. Sorry about my head moving around on the screen.
They were commenting on your guitar in the background and asking about it.
Yeah, they're dusty right now. I do play in a band called the Spark Tones that play at my school time to time, but we're really bad. Not as good as the music we were listening to tonight. So we only have 18 people participating in the quiz, but we're going to go ahead and give it a go. Oh, we're up to 26. The main process of capturing modern lifestyle Very good job. The reason why the Meiji Restoration was on a quiz about the Ottomans is because it's very good contextualization of what was going on in other regional powers. Go to our next question. That was not among the first industrialized. And of course, it is the Ottomans, our topic of tonight. The Russians and the Japanese were quick to join in by the mid to late 1800s, where the Ottomans still struggled. What was the significant challenge faced by the Ottoman Empire in the early 1900s? So, in increasing nationalist movements within the empire, at one time, the Ottomans were really good and benefited from a tolerant millet system. But over time, you would look at the millet system, the devshirme system, as breaking down as those regional powers wanted to have regional states, thus nationalism. Great. In 1911, the revolution in China overthrew Liang. And great exploitation. So we have the fall of the Manchu or the Qing dynasty, the fall of the last Chinese dynasty to Sun Yat-sen, and what will eventually become the Republic of China. Great job. Let's go on. What ideology was spending a country influence control over foreign regions and political benefits? Give this one a reveal. Answer is imperialism. And of course, we could sit there and say with that political benefit will become economic benefits. Following is the motive for imperial expansion. Excellent job. Do understand that the Industrial Revolution leads to imperialism, and imperialism leads to a lot of the conflict of the 1900s. So at the end of the day, learn imperialism, Google it, and do more. You need to know that one. Let's go on to a couple more questions. Why did Britain transfer the Ottoman Empire against Russia in the Crimean War? I'm going to give a fast reveal to this one. This one's a hard one, a pretty particular, specifically tight question. Answer is they saw Russia as a growing threat. And that is the answer. And it will be a growing threat into the 1900s, of course. All right, we're going to wind things down. We have 2 more questions. Which of the following shows a correct causation relationship? Revolutions lead to new states. Awesome. I do see a lot of you went with nationalism leads to anti-imperialist movements, and I can understand why you are going with that. We could also say nationalism leads to a lot of imperialism movements. It really depends on which view of nationalism you're using. Final question of the night. why were Western powers able to be dominant and position power relative to other countries? And our answer is the Industrial Revolution and its technological advances. Great job. A lot of great answers. I wasn't monitoring the chat there, so I'm going to let Dr. Posa wind things down, especially since she was able to look at the chat while I was looking at the quiz. Any last thoughts, Dr. Posa?
No, I think that, we have, they're asking about the music, of course, but this is actually the Fiveable music. And Fiveable has rolled out a new quiz feature, which is going to be part of like Fiveable Plus if you want to have unlimited access to quiz questions. But they now have a test bank of questions per unit, and you can get like up to 100 for free or something. They're rolling it out. So you will have more opportunities to listen to this music. Also, if you join our crams, we're going to have our live crams 5 nights starting Saturday, 3 hours, same kind of thing with slides, handouts, Q&As, quizzes. We're going to cover everything in the curriculum. And lots of practice questions, lots of tips and tricks. So join us. And now we figured out how to use the technology, and I think it'll go well. So
all right, we look to see all of you, as many of you as possible, each and every night. We're going to be starting off this Saturday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time. We'll see you all then.
all right.
Take care.
Thanks so much.